Okay, everyone, it is 3:31, and we're going to call this meeting to order. Mr. Johnson, will you call roll? Please.
Councilwoman Fugit.
Here.
Councilwoman Helsley. Here. Dr. Lyons. Here. Councilwoman Parker. Former Vice Mayor Pavlis.
Councilman Parker's just walked in.
Yes. Former Vice Mayor Saunders.
Here.
Vice Mayor Smith.
Here.
6 members present.
Thank you. You received a copy of the minutes, and it's also in your packet. Any changes or corrections to the minutes?
Move for approval. Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. I do not see anyone in the audience signed up to speak to public comments. Did anyone sign in?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. No reports of any kind, no special orders. So unfinished business. Mr. Johnson, do you want to talk to us about that? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So you'll see on the screens that it's also at your seats. It's kind of separated from the packet. A copy of the rules of procedure with strike-throughs, additions that encapsulate or include ones that we went over at the last meeting. And I thought we would begin by going through them, making sure that we had captured what the task force had envisioned. Beginning with rule number 2, we spent a lot of time in this section. We added memorials. We moved it from resolutions to this section. Under consent, added some language. When matters on the consent calendar are called up, they shall be considered without debate or amendment. An objection from any one member of council shall cause the item to be restored to the ordinary process by which items are placed in line for consideration on the regular agenda. So that's capturing that. The recorder shall report if there are any persons registered to speak on items included on the consent calendar.
Would you put on your microphone, please? I know you're close, but I can't really hear, and this is being recorded, so.
I assume if somebody does want to speak on one of the items, that takes it off of the consent and onto the regular.
A member would still have to, request or ask for it to be removed, but yes, that's the assumption. Continuing on, there's a strike through. We remove to reflect your current practice. The setting the date of a public hearing is being pulled off of this section. We continue with ordinances. I added a clause to reflect what the task force had discussed. Ordinances in second reading, adding which are approved on first reading by unanimous vote of members present and voting. And the next one, we just took out metropolitan, and there's several instances of Metropolitan Planning Commission just striking out metropolitan. And lastly, the appropriations for community improvement funds, adding that. Under section 7, this was just language that I came up with. We may not be where we land, but reports of committees or council members serving on committees or boards, and then another section for the announcements of community or neighborhood events or meetings. This is my rough language that I came up with and suggested.
I think that's very clear, so.
Okay. Under section 11, there's a strike through for memorials because we moved it into section 5, and then under section 13, make sure we're on that, it's on the screen, took out the time limit in here because it will be addressed later in the agenda in today's meeting under Rule 18. Continuing.
Well, wait,
yes.
While we're in that section. This announcements of community or neighborhood meetings, since we're not labeling that announcements from council members, it could presumably be anyone at the table.
It should just be council. I think that's what we meant.
It is, I do think that is what we meant. But as I thought about a new definition, I wasn't opposed to it being a time when the mayor or staff or council members who have an announcement could share. But I do think we should clarify.
Any thoughts or want to keep moving?
You could just put council member announcements of community neighborhood.
Turn your mic on.
Well, now that I say that, I'm going to retract that because it didn't include, I think that the aspect you're talking about is just general announcements from council.
And initially, I did think, yeah, we needed to clarify and put council members, but then I thought, well, it could be a moment to invite announcements from, the Community
staff.
Empowerment Department, or, I don't, I didn't have a strong opinion, just wanted to say it could help to clarify.
Even if the task force or council does want to keep it with council, it may need clarification that we're not talking about other people making announcements, members of council. Yeah. So,
Anybody feel strongly?
But does that include department announcements or just council members?
Well, that's what Ms. Parker is talking about, because I think when we all we really were getting at was that one line in their reports was a hodgepodge of neighborhood meetings, or if you served on the CAT board, you might tell us what was going on with CAT. And I think the thought was to say, if you serve on a city board by your virtue of being on city council, you're representing city council on that board, it's good to report back what's going on. And that is separate from just saying there's a party, a street fair going on in such and such a neighborhood.
So could we change the 8 that says announcements of community? That could just be general council member announcements,
Yes.
okay?
And then that's what I thought we meant. I see what Ms. Parker's saying, but I also think the mayor makes a lot of departmental announcements, but are you, okay. Does anybody, okay,
I saw that.
all right,
okay.
okay.
Moving on.
Moving on.
Rule number 9, it's just changing metropolitan, striking that out. Rule number 13, I think it's the same thing, striking out metropolitan. And I don't think there are any other, so that's as far as we got.
Yes.
We were going to resume with Rule 13 when we get later into the agenda.
Yes. Okay, thank you for that, Will. It is nice to actually see it, the way it would look after we change things. And then, next item that we have is the draft memorandum of the task force, which I believe is also assigned to you, Mr. Johnston.
Yes. Yes, in the packet.
Apparently, we're very good. We were very good last time, assigned you a lot of work.
In the packet after the minutes, I drafted a letter to council, the mayor, and the law director outlining what we had discussed at the first meeting. These are rules that the task force is of the opinion that they're not being observed for whatever reason, and the task force is of the opinion that they should be followed again, resumed. So this is just a draft, a suggestion of language that at the conclusion of either the entire task force's time or after we finish with the rules, would be communicated to the
This is
administration.
page
and the council.
18 of the packet?
Correct,
Okay.
yes, thank you.
18 or 28, the number 2 about adding back that, and then putting the council district number, council district on things.
And of course, we will presumably be adding to this as we continue through the rules with additional.
Okay, that's just the first stab at that. And then the big thing, any questions or comments about that? Okay.
So on page 18 of the packet, this is a draft memorandum to council, the mayor, and the law director regarding rules that the task force has identified that are in the written rules but maybe are no longer being followed. They're in a state of disuse, for example, and the task force is of the opinion that they should be followed, that they desire them to be followed.
And so you've identified a couple, or are you just showing us the format it will be shared in?
The format also including the rules that this group had identified at its last meeting that we identified that are not being followed but would like to see followed going forward.
We're not through all of them, but those were the rules. Rule
Just
number
these two, correct?
These were the only two
Yes, these only
that,
two.
So far.
Yeah.
yeah.
So the items on, are you tracking?
Well, we just went through the rules of procedure and talked about some,
Well,
I
those
mean,
are-
I see what you're saying about what was already a rule that wasn't being followed. I just thought there were more.
I can go back through the minutes and the recording from the last meeting. These are the two that I identified from the meeting, but
Okay.
certainly I may have missed something.
No, okay.
So we can go through, but for now, this is what you came up with. We stopped at Rule 13, so there may be
Right,
many more to come.
yeah.
But okay with everybody? To move on. And then the next thing is a pretty big thing.
Yes.
It's a long list.
On the next page, page 19 of the packet, this is a list of rules that I've identified and am recommending to be reorganized into a separate article later in the process. There are, as you can see, several, and it goes through the entire list of rules. Some of them with asterisks, I'm recommending that they be separated in parts. There are elements in some of these rules, like order of debate, for example. Most of that, I think, should probably stay in the orders of procedure, but some of them, you'll see later, I'll point out why they probably should not be part of here, this part.
Okay, and you're doing that with your parliamentary understanding of the way things like this ought to work, and just the fact that some things are conflicting and confusing.
Confusing, yes, indeed.
Okay. So as we go through, we'll be talking about them more specifically. But we did ask him, rather than us just all try to figure this out, to give us a starting point. So thank you. So, thank you for that, Mr. Johnson, all that work. That took quite a bit of work, so thank you. And then that's our unfinished business. Our new business, Dane Morgan is here from the Baker School, Howard Baker School, and we asked him, or the Baker Center, to look at public forum, how other cities do public forum, and workshops. And so, looks like you've done some work and have some things to report. So if you would come to the podium. Thank you. Do we need name and address for the record?
Is this how I
Yes, your name is fine.
Dane Morgan.
Yes.
Yeah, so thank you. I spent the last few weeks kind of trying to figure out how I wanted to start looking at other cities' practices. And I've started with cities in the state of Tennessee, and I decided to look at those with populations that are over 50,000 to keep it relatively close to practices that you might see here. I found that as population declined, transparency also tends to decline. And so I believe there's a table that's been passed out. And so what this is I did an analysis, a content analysis of charters and city code to see what's written for the 14 selected cities. And there are 3 exceptions to that. Nashville, Memphis, and Chattanooga are fairly sparse on information pertaining to their practices within their city code. That information is kept elsewhere in external documents, or it's codified via resolution instead of ordinance. And so what I'm finding is that there's a lack of information pertaining to the specifics in most of these cities, especially the smaller cities. So the 4 largest cities were Nashville, Memphis, Chattanooga, and Clarksville, and they generally provide the most information about their practices. The other 10 essentially outlined their order of business and provide very small details here and there. So, for example, a city like Hendersonville does specify that their public comment period is before their agenda items, but they don't discuss their limits on that or the time limits for the most part. In contrast, cities like Nashville, Memphis, and Chattanooga have pages and pages dedicated to their practices, so they have provided significantly more detail. So we have good parameters around how they run their meetings. There are also 2 different categories of rules that I want to kind of look at. So some of them have variants. Those are rules like limits on speaker time when speaking on individual agenda items. So from city to city, you might see a difference of that number's 3 minutes in Nashville, 5 minutes in Chattanooga. There are also other rules that are more idiosyncratic that aren't reflected in the table that might be interesting or useful to look at, but you don't find from city to city. So for example, in Chattanooga, there's actually a 30-day limit on the number of times that a citizen can participate. They're limited to 2 participations in a period of 30 days. Another sort of idiosyncratic rule might be, also in Chattanooga, zoning applicants would fall under speaking on agenda items. They're given 7 minutes, while most other items, speakers are given 5. So to kind of fix the sparse information, I put together a survey with help from MTAS, and I actually got the all clear from our director to send it this morning. So I want to send that back to MTAS, and it will ask for some of these more specific questions about speaker time limits on agenda items during the public comment period, where the public comment period is located in relation to the other order of business items, the overall duration of the public comment period, and whether or not items during the public comment period have to be germane to the agenda items. That seems to be something that varies, but is not always clarified. As far as workshops, this is another kind of instance where, yes?
I'm sorry, I have a question. So when you're talking about the public comment section, that's basically what we do at the end of the meeting.
Yes, that's
And
correct.
so you're saying it's varied whether that has to be part in reference to the agenda that council either is about to go through or went through. We currently don't have any limitations. It's just anybody can speak to us about anything related to the city.
I believe that that's the case, and I'd like to
Okay.
confirm that.
Okay, thank
My
you.
understanding, based on what I looked at for the city of Hendersonville, so if you'll notice, it's stated that they don't mention having speaker time limits on agenda items. I think that's because they don't allow speaking time on any agenda items, and then their public comment section just has to be germane to those items.
Okay,
That's my understanding of their practice.
okay, that would be helpful. Thanks.
As far as workshops, I found that mentions of workshops were also very low. Across the 14 cities, I found maybe 5 or 6 total mentions of workshops. None of them were to define them. And so generally, what I could extrapolate is that they're usually narrow in focus, pertaining to specific issues, and they're used to discuss items that may appear on future agendas, but that's as much as I could find. So in the survey that I've been preparing, I do have a couple of questions about whether or not workshops appear in any official procedures, and if they do use workshops, what do they tend to use them for, in reference to how the governing body might use them.
Great, thank you.
And as of now, this is basically what I have. I should have, assuming I get the survey sent out this week, which is the goal, I believe MTAS said that the turnaround time on getting responses tends to be 2 to 3 weeks.
Okay, okay. Any questions? I appreciate that. Makes me feel like we're not alone.
I do have one question.
Yes.
In here, you mentioned that sometimes the speaking allotment is different for zoning items as opposed to other items like resolutions but I only see one reference. Were there more than one? Like Clarksville, for example, you said number of speakers per item. You say no more than 2 per zoning amendment. Are there any other distinctions around zoning versus non-zoning items in terms of rules where, zoning speakers get to speak for 5 minutes, but people speaking to items not related to zoning only get 3?
I don't recall which city it is right now, but I can find that. One of them gave zoning applicants who speak during these meetings 15 minutes, and that includes a rebuttal period that they get. And as far as I understand, the way that that works is they can use part of their time. A council member can interject, and then they are given the remainder of their time to respond. So I saw that in 2 of the cities, and then one of the other, Smyrna, I believe, they have a rule where there are rebuttals on, I believe, any agenda items where citizens comment on them.
Now, in practice, the only rebuttals I can think of are related to zoning. Is that explicitly stated in our rules, or is that just a general way of operating?
Our custom is that rebuttals only apply to
Custom.
appeals. Yeah, I use that word
Yeah.
because the code is much less
Okay.
explicit.
Okay, so rebuttals are only allowed for appeals, but that's a custom? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions about this?
Thank you, Dane.
Yeah.
think you've identified.
Turn on your mic.
Yeah, you've identified a lot of good variables to look at, and I think the survey will uncover a lot more systematically as well, so that'll be really helpful.
Thank you.
I appreciate you doing this.
Thank you, of course, I'm happy to.
I did have a question.
Yes.
Ms. Parker.
I was curious, other than zoning, was there a broader category, and I haven't seen it, so I can't imagine that you've seen it, but I'll ask the question. I can imagine that anyone who's the subject of an ordinance or resolution coming before us, and that can be in a even in a celebratory way, like in a family that's a part of a memorial or something like that. But also, a neighborhood when it comes to the zoning issues, or an employee when it comes to some of the, salary and benefits. You haven't seen a more general application of allotting more time to speakers if they have some sort of connection to the issue in that way, other than it just being zoning?
I couldn't tell you which city it was, but I do believe that there was one that offered higher time limits to either groups that were representing an organization, might have been the language, but I would have to find that, and I can find that if you would like me to.
Interesting. Well, that'd be interesting. I'll be curious what you found. But I would be interested in exploring how, if we thought some sort of variation in the time limit could be useful in Knoxville, that we try to find one that has a broader application than just limiting it to zoning. Because I do think that there are other times when we want to give more time to an issue or to allow, an individual to speak, and it might not fit under that zoning topic, but one suggestion.
Well, if you have some ideas of examples of what that would be, that would be helpful for us to talk about too. I know you said ordinance, but specific kind of pockets, like you talked about the, like if somebody's a memorial, or the zoning would probably be ordinance. A lot of that might be neighborhood kind of things.
Yeah.
So I haven't really thought about it, so nothing comes to mind right away, but that would be helpful if you can
Happy to, yeah.
give us some
Yeah, yeah.
ideas. And everybody think about that, because I guess right now, our custom would be a council member can ask for more time for the speaker.
That's always an option.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
And thank you for coming during spring break.
Of course.
Graduate students don't always get a lot of spring break time, though. So, thank you. All right. Any other comments about that, the workshops, the public comment forum? Okay, seeing no lights, we'll go on and start with rule number 13.
So I'll begin with the notes or comments that were identified from members. Section, your Rule 13, sub 3, or sub C rather, there was a comment about considering whether adding staff recommendations in the ordinance summary in addition to the planning commission vote. And I think we talked about that at the previous meeting.
We did. Did we decide? I mean, what do we think about that? Ms. Parker thinks we should do the staff recommendations. Absolutely, okay. I'm just, yeah, I need some head nodding or some yes or something, because I'm trying, well, you know, not anybody can just see this. I'm like, okay, I don't want to just be winging it up here going, I think they all agreed, so, okay, thank you. Help me here.
You know, in the scouts, they say, they don't say, is everybody ready to move? They ask, is anybody not ready? I
Yes.
think that's a good way
Well,
to
I was trying to
adopt.
do this up here with the agenda, hearing no objections, but
Are there any objections?
yes, so, all right. That'll be, that's the phrase, people. Without objection, we're moving forward. Okay.
Also in Rule 13, sub D, it is unclear to me, these are my comments, to be clear. It's unclear to me if these provisions are currently being complied with respect to the road construction, whether or not private or public funds are being used, or if they're being built to the standards of the city engineer. So that was just unclear. I'm not certain if that is happening or it is not happening. And maybe that requires investigation. I don't know.
But these are public roads, are they not?
Presumably,
Yes.
yeah.
Then I suppose that public roads, they would build to the standards of our engineers.
Yeah, my question would be, why is this in here?
Yeah.
Because is that just something left from the day when people, it could be when developers built roads. Like if you did a subdivision, I mean, I'm just saying back then,
Well, they still do that.
I know, but now I don't know that you can get a permit to do all that stuff without that. I'm just wondering. So maybe this is a question if we
Doesn't
can.
the, oftentimes, like on, say, South Waterfront, when the part of it is the private developers, it's not just roads, maybe it'd
Right,
be
parking
the
lot.
river walk or
Right.
something conveying that, I think that this could apply
Yes.
there, to have that.
Yeah, like if we're going to take it over, we want to
Right.
make sure it does all that.
And
But
some
the
of these would be-
question, oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
That's okay.
But the question remains whether
We're doing it or not.
we're doing it.
Well,
Because
I
it doesn't
think,
seem familiar.
I think, yeah, are we doing it and is it what we think it is? Do we think this means what we think it means?
Right.
And are we doing it? So, Will, can you
can
follow up on?
investigate.
Yes, investigate that for us, please.
Okay. The next one identified was sub G. The council at its Thursday workshop preceding a regular meeting may by majority vote defer matters from the agenda or add matters to its agenda. By custom, council is not using workshops or work sessions for this purpose. And the question would be, should this stay in the rules? Should it be removed to conform with your practice?
Well,
Go ahead,
May
Ms.
I?
Parker. Yeah,
to add to that, we have kind of the reverse rule that, and I don't know where it is, but that allows council to refer an item to workshop.
Yes, there is a section on that. It's coming up. I think it may be the next rule, Rule 14.
And that's not really our practice.
It's not.
well, I think that, I'm sorry,
Oh, yeah, next rule.
Mr. Saunders, you speak before I speak, please. You had your light on. Oh, I was just going to say that this makes sense if workshops were used the way they're used at the Board of Education, where you go over the entire agenda days before the meeting, so you can get any questions answered, and then you just come back and vote at the meeting. I mean, that's the practice of some. That's not how city council works, and so workshops are more based on topics, things that we might find interesting that we talk about at our city council retreats, so. So my thought is, why does it stay in here if that isn't how we're operating?
Right. I have a proposal,
Okay?
and I'm, to see what other committee members feel. But I'm intrigued by county commission's process, which I'm not very familiar with, but I've noticed that commissioners are able to call a workshop by themselves without a full vote from the commission. And then that allows them to take on an issue, hold a workshop, maybe one other commissioner comes, but they can move a conversation forward without the vote of the full body.
And so, and then those workshops, I think that's something that I'd like to see how, can you just check our neighbor? Like, at the other end of the sixth
County
floor?
commission.
Because to me, that way, what you're describing to me isn't really a full-on workshop. It is somebody saying, I want to have a meeting about this, and getting whoever they want to come talk to them about it, and anybody can come. So, thoughts?
We're now really gone to Rule 14, calling one. I was wondering if we'd resolve G on 13, which I suggest that it come out.
Did G just come out?
Right, because.
We're not doing it.
They're not doing it. It's not speaking to the way workshops are used. And I'm personally a little uneasy with having something that may have been deferred to the next council meeting, having action taken on it at the workshop, because not that many people, it's not a formal meeting in the way that a council meeting is. And since we don't do it, I think only thing G does is possibly mislead somebody if we're not doing it. Unless I guess what I'm saying is, if something's not happening, we should default to fewer, to removal, unless there's a reason to keep it.
Well, I agree with that, because I also think unless you're going to have a Thursday workshop every other Thursday, then we don't do it.
I think I can't remember, but I think we have used this rule. But correct me if I'm wrong.
I don't.
When we were on the timeline for the not the charter, well, it was pre-charter, once the state law was passed impacting Knoxville elections. There was
Do we have a special called meeting?
There was a
special called meeting,
which is a voting.
Which is different. And
which
it's
is,
a vote.
and then we referred from that meeting to the, no, it was just a special called meeting.
Okay. Okay.
I'm only hesitant because if we may not have used it, but I can see, I'm hesitant to say it now because I can see a way to use it, but we could also just call a special meeting.
I think it would be cleaner to call a special meeting than leave this in here with the implication that we meet every other Thursday. That's the thing that bothers me.
Right, it says at its Thursday workshop implies that workshop is.
Yeah, so. How about we take that out, G, and, okay, is that a general consensus? Because I think, Ms. Parker makes a point, we can always have a called meeting for anything. Okay, now we went into 14, talking about workshops.
Yes. In Rule 14, no comments from members, but I did identify that by custom, council does not use committees or workshops to refer legislation to be deliberated on. I suggest either removing the rule or start following it, or, yeah.
Well, anybody have an opinion before I?
Sorry, Will, which item are you?
Sorry, this is Rule 14, Sub A.
A, okay.
Yeah.
Proposed ordinance or resolutions may be referred to the appropriate committee or committee of the whole by the mayor or the council after the first reading.
Council really only has one standing committee, and that's the Audit Committee. And it has a limited mission, if you will.
Okay, let's think. So we have a beer board ordinance coming before us. I'm trying to imagine why we would want to use this. Is the intention behind that the beer board ordinance would come to us for first reading, but then by our rule, we should send it back to the beer board?
We could, we don't have to by this, the way I read it. May be
Maybe.
referred.
Yeah, I don't understand this rule. Of course they can be referred.
Here's what I think. Again, that's a dangerous thing. I have no context in how this ever got used, but I could see there being an item on the agenda that there was a lot of read on the first ordinance, and then somebody said, if we had a committee on housing, I'm not suggesting that we do, but that
Right.
it get referred to a committee, like,
May I?
yes.
I mean, this committee exists with a deadline, but if this committee continues in an ongoing way, you could see a circumstance where somebody brings forward
A rule.
an ordinance rule change out of nowhere or just on their own initiative, and it brings before council, and council saying, we would like the Rules Committee to take this up at their next meeting and deliberate it.
That's a really good point.
So this could be a standing committee in the future. I think it should be. I'm just going to throw that out there now, but I think that is an example of an existing reoccurring committee where someone brings a rule change and would prefer that body study it, evaluate it, and come back.
This is permissive. I mean,
It's not
there's
required.
there's nothing prevented this from happening, and it's not requiring that.
I will also note that your rules, your parliamentary authority, Robert's Rules, does allow for referral to committees.
Right.
This is really restating what your parliamentary authority allows for,
Right.
and has dozens of pages that speak to how
Right.
it works.
So if it's not hurt anything, do we just leave it because Vice Mayor Smith may have a proposal about creating another standing committee?
Okay?
Yeah, I think we should keep this one.
Okay, all right. Does anyone strongly object to that? Okay, then we're just going to move forward.
Okay. Rule 15, which is a subject on voting. We had one comment from a member. It
Sorry,
was-
can we go back
Sorry.
to 14D?
14, yeah.
Oh,
This is, if a council member requests a matter be deferred to a workshop, the council member must attend the workshop, and once the matter has been heard, it should be placed on the regular agenda regardless of whether the council member is requesting the work. This is a little foreign in general to how we operate
Yeah, this implies that it was when you had a workshop about something that you were going to be
Right.
voting on, an ordinance.
Well, and it's related to Councilman Parker's point about how a council member can take up the helm of a workshop and
It is kind of in that vein.
it says you better be there.
He or she who
might miss
wants
it.
it must call it.
I, th- I mean, I think it's useful. To me, it would be even better to provide more clarity to say the person who requested shall chair it or something like that, you know? But
I would also suggest, if this is to be rewritten, the use of the term deferred is a ambiguous term in parliamentary terminology. Referred is a better term.
oh,
Deferred can cause confusion as to what you mean.
yeah. That didn't even make any sense to me, actually. Oh, yeah, no, I get it.
So
I get it.
I will say this, we can always pick something back up at the next meeting and talk about it again if I may be referring this for further discussion at our next meeting, if there's still some, I'm not
I think that's a
hearing-
good idea. Can I just ask one qualifying question?
Yes.
Is this the only remaining rule that suggests an item can be referred to a workshop? That there's authority to do so? Because to Councilman Parker's point, we don't really, you can't do that right now.
It may be, but I'm not going to swear to that.
Okay. All right. I think we should put a question mark by this and come
Yeah,
back to it.
and come back to it,
Yeah.
because I think we all have some more questions and think through how this might work, and,
Yeah, and how a workshop, to Councilwoman Parker's position, I mean, how a workshop is called and who can do that is not specified.
Yeah, it's
This
not
whole
big.
thing is assuming, really in context, that they're regularly happening every
2
non-ca-
weeks.
every, 2 weeks on that, and they're not. So there's really not anything that specifies how a workshop is called, who can call it, and et cetera.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is part of the survey, right? The workshop?
Unless, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll have some more information about that in a few weeks.
Okay, let's do that.
It may be referred even to
Okay.
May,
All
by the
right,
time
well-
we get something back. Okay, so we're putting a pin in workshop stuff because we're getting surveys on workshops
Yeah.
that can help us. Okay,
Rule 15, if we're ready for that.
yes,
Okay, yes.
without
Rule-
objection, I think we are.
Rule 15, Sub A, all council votes shall be taken by a or nay. One, I would suggest drawing distinctions between different methods of voting because not all votes are taken by a,
A voice vote.
right. I mean, some are roll call, some are elections where you're calling out the name of the person you're voting for. I would also suggest changing the language from yay and nay. That's more in keeping with current parliamentary use. Aye and nay, I think, is a little more dated.
Well,
Or,
we say aye. All those in favor say aye.
Yeah.
All opposed, no. We don't say nay, we
It's-
say
it's true.
aye and no.
it's true, yeah, well, yeah. Nay, horses neigh.
Yes, I know,
Yeah.
yeah, and we just say no.
Right.
So, so we need to,
So what are you proposing?
what do you suggest?
I can come back with suggested
Yes,
language to
come back with some
clarify
suggested
this.
language.
Sub B, upon the consideration of any resolution or any proposed ordinances, upon any reading, the chair shall call for roll call upon the request therefore by the members of the council. This is confusing by practice. Any one member of council could request a roll call vote, but this doesn't say that. It doesn't define how many need to ask for a roll call. If it's the desire that a single member can demand it, I would suggest putting that in the rule.
That's how we function.
It is how you function.
on this body. On another body I've been on, it wasn't one person.
Yeah, I mean, your parliamentary authority would say a majority vote would be required for a roll call, but that's not how this body works.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm not saying pro or con. Different bodies do it differently.
Sure.
It's a really good point. I have been confused
Yeah,
about how this works.
yeah.
So change the language to any member of the council.
Any one member, if you want to conform to your practice.
I like it.
I mean, that's what we do now, so that's not really changing anything. It's just writing down what we do.
And I think that's a good practice anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's usually not called unless it's something that's got some heat around it. And people are going to be, and if our technology gets any better, we won't ever need to call a roll call vote because we'll be voting electronically. I'm not saying now.
We could, yeah.
I'm not saying
Yeah, yeah.
now, but I'm just saying, that's how they do in the legislature. I mean,
Yes.
there are systems that could make that,
So at
this
some
point moot.
At some point in the future, you're going to have a display that says,
I don't know that. I think the technology is there that we could at some point, when software updates and all that kind of stuff, that you could do that. I'm not saying we can do it right now, but I just think that the way technology is advancing, there may come a day that this rule is moot. But for now, we need it, so.
do you
okay.
ever have a vote where people just raise their hand? No,
No.
Not normally.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh. So we're going to clarify this.
Yes.
And move on. But right now, it sounds like, I'm not hearing strong objection to follow our current practice, which is any member of council can call for a roll call vote.
And we do not need to include the mayor's ability to do that.
You might need to. It's not stated here. Your parliamentary authority would say if the chair is unclear of the outcome, she can do that. So,
I think you've got to leave that in there because as long as we're doing voice, it is hard because I've chaired school board meetings and it was hard to hear sometimes and it's like, to be clear. But, doing a roll call vote.
I don't want to complicate this, but is there any reason to have all the votes recorded like other legislative bodies do?
That's what we're talking about. I don't think.
I
we
mean,
get-
for posterity, just like when the minutes are reported of the meeting, to have, instead of just pass, but the list. I'm not suggesting it necessarily, but
do
we're a
I?
little bit of an outlier compared to.
so in the minutes, I'm recording the vote outcomes of all main motions.
Right.
The motions to approve, motions to deny. I'm not necessarily recording in the minutes all subsidiary motions, such as
That's right.
a motion to postpone or a motion to amend.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that.
But we are listed who approved and who didn't.
Yes.
Right,
yes.
okay, good.
Yeah, we are.
If we're ready to continue.
Yes.
The last thing I identified in Rule 15 was sub E. At any council meeting at which a quorum is present, matters presented to council as part of the agenda shall be presumed to have been considered on their merit, regardless of the vote of council, and whether or not a minimum of 5 votes were cast in favor or against the motion or issue. I'm very unclear as to what this is really trying to accomplish. I don't know what it means.
That you could,
Doesn't that have to do with appeals to, that you have to show something was discussed to have to do with land use? I thought in some cases that,
I think it does, but I think it's moot at this point.
Okay.
Some may recall the prior Brown garage.
that's right, yeah, that was the one.
Yes. So that came back to council because the court said, well, yeah, that's exactly what it was.
Yeah, that's what that was.
Council decided not to take up the motion, the appeal. No motion was made, and they considered it dead, and the court said, no,
so
you
you
have
have to.
you have to
have a
affirmatively-
denial.
You have
you
to,
have to take a vote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
well then, should this stay?
That's probably something,
For the law department?
that's the law department.
Okay.
That's beyond my abilities.
So ask Rob and the city attorney, our attorney and the city attorney. Okay,
Rule 16.
yeah,
There were no-
certification of funds.
Yeah. Again, this is unclear to me that this is being included on agenda items. Contracts would be a good example.
It's not included.
It isn't to my knowledge.
I'm just trying to think of what type of availability of funds this is asking for, whether it's general funds or reserve, or trying to think of what that language would look like.
I read this as, just tell us where you're taking it from. Like, is it reserve funds or is it already in the general fund?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way I interpret that, is like, what pot are you taking it from? You know, grant funds and a match from this budget line item. I think that's what that's the way I read it, but that doesn't mean that's what it means.
And
Yes, Tom, Ms. Parker?
yeah, no, I agree that, I don't know, that may not be what it means. But we do get that fiscal note, and it does tell us whether,
Yeah.
you know, there are private funds
Right,
being
yeah.
used to make up what's needed.
Yeah. So it may be in there.
Doesn't Boyce tell us where the money's coming from, if he's pulling from another fund?
Yeah,
He usually tells
does, and
that.
if you do, that's why we have those budget amendments and all that kind of stuff to clean up and move money, but,
So I may be mistaken on this one.
so it may be worth asking for some clarification.
Yeah, I imagine Boyce would say,
We do it,
we do it, and that's where it is.
yeah.
It might not be verbal, but I think it's in our packet.
Yeah, I think it's in the packet, but let's double check.
Okay.
So-
And with that, I think we're into Rule 18, which
Order of debate.
I doubt we'll get beyond today.
Yeah, is this a good stopping point, or do we want to start Rule 18? You want to go 15 more minutes and talk about Rule 18? I'm just asking y'all's pleasure.
Sure.
The rest, there are only 4 of us that have a 5 o'clock meeting, so if we're willing to stay 15 more minutes or so, let's
Yeah, I would like a
keep
break
going.
in between, but yeah, let's
Yeah,
do it.
yeah. Okay,
So these are member comments, and these run the gamut, lots of issues in Rule 18. Reconsider the maximum time for each speech. This is members' speech, not the public. 5 minutes is insufficient. That was a comment we received. There was a comment from a member, reconsider the custom of allowing unlimited number of speeches on the same question by a member. At the moment, it is the practice, yes. You can be recognized an unlimited number of times.
What is the rule?
So the practice is unlimited. Your parliamentary authority would say no more than 2 times
2 times per item.
per question, which is a distinction. So you would have a main motion to approve an ordinance, for example, and you could speak twice to it. And then, let's say there was a motion to amend. You could speak twice to the motion to amend. And then there may be another motion to postpone. You can speak twice to the motion to postpone. It's per member, per question.
which in our language means per motion.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah,
that's
sorry,
how we need to think about it. I mean, you're doing the
Yeah.
right parliament, but I'm just saying, you know, real world is we can speak twice to any motion, is what parliamentary procedure says.
Correct. Your practice is unlimited.
And
Yeah,
so
That's the practice, though, is it not?
But I would-
Unlimited?
Well, I mean, at the or not, as long as council's willing to let that continue, of course.
Well, I think for me, we need to clarify this some, because this, to me, is an example where we say we follow Robert's rules, but in practice, we don't. So are we going, so, I mean, that's a conversation we've had a lot about some of these, is And if you're not going to go by standard Robert's rules, then my understanding is then we should clarify what we are doing that is different from Robert's rules.
Yes.
So I think this is another thing we need to think about. And I would be interested to know, your list of work is getting longer. If the Baker, excuse me, if the Baker Center would consider, I'm not putting you on the spot, if the Baker Center would consider asking MTAS or doing some research on, I'd be interested to see how many large metropolitan cities do Robert's rules, or do they have unlimited discussion? I'm just curious. Would you turn on your mic, please?
I'm sorry. I think we could put that in the questionnaire, or we could pursue that. Do they stick, what the question would be, do you go by purely, basically by Robert's rules, or do you allow, or have exceptions?
Do you have a rule?
Do you have a rule that overrides Robert's rules?
Because I think that's what we're talking about. Because what we've said is some things we do by practice, and we're changing our rules to make sure it reflects what we do by practice. Okay.
But what we're talking about, do the cities strictly follow Robert's rules, or do they allow council to have their own rules that override that?
Yeah, do they have a
Right.
rule about how often a council member can speak to any one motion, is what it really gets down to.
Right. Okay, well, I'll talk to Dane. We'll have, MTAS is going to do the survey, and
Okay,
that will
all right.
see whether that works or not.
Oh, Ms. Parker?
Just a quick thought. I think it's important to do the research and see what practices are, from other cities. But I do also think it's important for us as a body to just sit with what we're hoping to achieve. And, when you look at cases around First Amendment issues, it's always a question of, what's your governmental interest here in limiting speech? And if, even if we find that we are in alignment with other cities, if we put certain limitations in place, but we don't necessarily have a need to, I would want us to question it and just take pause.
Oh, I'm not saying we go by what other people say. I just
Yeah.
kind of like to know what other people are doing. I also think we always have the right to call the question if we feel like a discussion
It's an
is
option.
being on and on and on. So I also think, is that somewhere in here?
Previous question?
Yes.
Previous question is in your parliamentary authority. It's not mentioned,
Okay.
it's not mentioned in these rules.
Okay, all right. Okay,
Comments continue on the subject of the debate of members. This is not getting yet to comments from the public, but reconsider the custom of members' time being consumed in the asking of questions of staff. This is, the comment I got from a member was that this is a disservice and it's problematic. So council members commonly ask questions of, members of staff, directors, chiefs, and their time is being consumed.
yes, and we tell them to hurry up. We tell staff to hurry up.
But how does that work in other legislative bodies? There's not a pause while someone's answering a question.
That might be
At the
true.
federal level, you are allotted a time, and
Yeah,
you have to
stay within it.
encourage quick answers, and.
You might encourage staff to answer
Yeah.
quickly.
That's when they say recalling my time, right?
Yeah.
Well, you don't even have a rule about that, so
Okay,
yeah.
I don't feel like it's, yeah, sometimes it consumes more time than you prefer, but I think it's a rare circumstance.
I do think it can be an issue, and but I didn't say anything initially because I don't have a recommendation on ways to improve it or change it. But another side to that, another reason why I found it frustrating is because there's no time limit on the mayor's staff. So if they take up my time, but then they're allowed to go on for another 15 minutes, it's like, ugh.
But you can reclaim your time from them, right? If you can.
I can tell them to be quiet,
That's
which
right.
then ends up feeling rude and it's contentious.
But you
and
have that authority.
I do,
Yeah.
but I'm trying to create some rules that don't create these contentious moments.
I would suggest putting that in a rule, actually, if that's the intent, that you could reclaim the time. There's nothing in your rules that says you can reclaim your time.
Right, it does just keep going down.
Yeah.
That might be a way to resolve it.
Especially if you were asking a question of another member,
Yeah,
they could filibuster your time.
right,
But if you want to put that in the rule that you can reclaim it,
yeah.
I would suggest stating that.
I don't know about this because you can call for order, a point of order. You can reclaim your time. It is a council member's time at any given point. You can, unless I'm wrong.
I would suggest just putting that in a rule that says you could do that. There's nothing saying you can.
But if
that's just
if
not-
it's a Roberts rule that you can do that,
That's actually a practice that Roberts actually talks about that Congress uses, but it's not something that
other bodies
others
use.
bodies use unless they explicitly state it.
I mean, but if you ask a director a question, if once they answer that question, if they feel the need to tell you about their day, you can say thank you and move on and be polite while you're doing it. I mean, you don't have to be rude with it, I don't think.
Well, logistically, Mr. Johnson,
It would be challenging.
it would be challenging, I imagine.
To take back your time.
Well, to give you more time, is that what you're saying?
Well, just to be able to monitor how, when the person starts speaking, so you know what time to reclaim for them, for the timekeeping.
Yes, that would be very,
Could be.
Mr.
As I
Saunders.
recall,
Yeah.
this has never really been an issue. We used to let, and Nick can opine on this, but we let members talk. Now, sometimes I think it's excessive, and perhaps others do as well. We had one member on the council I was on that would walk out. Anyhow, so what do you do?
Well, I think this council has moved to 5 minutes just to keep everything fair and everything moving, rather than a 10-minute or 15-minute or some kind of people walking out while you're trying to make your point. So, okay, Mr. Johnson. I think, I'm not sure.
I didn't hear a consensus.
I
to
didn't hear a
change it, yeah.
consensus. We may have to talk about that some more, but I think we need, this will be one of those things that how some of these intersect with one another may determine how you do the rule.
Right. Continuing, these are some of the comments that I had. So it was a law passed by the state legislature a few years ago with respect to public comment, and it put some more parameters around that. At present, your rules allow for public comment on just about any item that appears on the agenda, but the state law allows, or it doesn't require public comment for a few particular items of business, including disciplinary proceedings. So this could look like me being disciplined by the body, or a member of council being disciplined, like expulsion proceedings. Under your current rules, we would have to allow public comment on all of this. So someone could sign up to speak on the expulsion of some hypothetical council member someday. But the state law doesn't require public comment on that. So the body may want to consider excluding disciplinary proceedings from public comments. The state legislature has given you that power.
I
It's a pretty
see,
significant move.
but
would
I see
imagine.
pros and cons for that.
Yeah.
And you could limit it to discipline of your staff and/or members of the body.
Yeah. I'll be honest with you, I'm not at all prepared to decide about that one today. I think we're going to have to sit with this some more. This order of debate, I think this, I'm sorry, I opened this can of worms. This is actually going to be a lot more to talk about. May I suggest that between now and our next meeting, we all really look at 18 a lot, and that this is where we start at our next meeting, because I think this will be a much richer discussion. I don't want to rush this. This is pretty meaty. And then, just so I can accomplish something, Rule 19, anybody got a problem with it?
Yes.
Okay,
Right.
go ahead.
Yeah, just move it, that's it.
Move.
It doesn't need to be touched on, in my opinion.
And why?
I'm sorry?
Why does it need to be recruited? I mean,
needs-
somebody has to turn something in, but who does
Right.
it go to? And you're saying we don't need to require 15 days?
Well, going back, this was one of the items that I identified that we want to reorganize, perhaps.
Okay, good.
Yes.
All right, that's fine. I'm
Yes.
just like, I think as a former financial professional, I really do care that people turn in receipts.
Yes,
Okay, so we're going to remove this one.
yes.
Okay, well, in the last 5 minutes I have, I would like to move us to the next agenda item, which is our April meeting, which was to be on April 15th. And I would, if we kept this same cadence, but in light of some of the discussion we've had today about Rule 18 and how long that may be quite a bit of discussion, how would people feel about moving our April meeting to 2 weeks from now till April 1st? Council is not meeting on April 15th. We're not meeting again till the 29th, but I would like to keep us moving.
Instead of tax day, April Fool's Day.
Yes, April Fool's Day.
I'm okay with it.
Or it can, for those of us on council, we already have council meeting that day. It's just 2 weeks from now, and we can spend some more time starting on 18 at our next meeting.
May have that be the only item of business.
Yes, I think it may be our only. We'll see what we can get to, but that's for sure.
Would it delay us too much to move it to the April 29th meeting?
Well,
Possibly. And the only reason I ask is because as we began this discussion, I agree that we need to spend some time with this. And I'm just not sure if I'll be able to spend as much time as I would like over the next 2 weeks.
okay, can we just have a meeting on April 1st and do what we do? Maybe we don't start with maybe we don't start at 18?
Yeah,
Or
no,
see
if
what
there's
we
a
can
strong
do.
preference for the
I
first,
mean,
then I can definitely go with the
if-
first.
If we could meet April 1st and let's see
Yeah, I
how
like
far we
that.
get.
If you want to do some other items instead of 18, it's just,
Yeah.
April 29th is a month and
Yeah,
10 days away.
at least maybe we could get through some other stuff if we're not really prepared to deal with 18. That might wait till the May meeting or something, or the end of
Okay, that
April.
works with me.
Okay. All right. So without objection, it sounds like we can meet April 1st. So We will not meet on, we will schedule our next meeting for April 1st. We will continue through the rules and maybe revisit some of the things that we already talked about that we wanted to think about, and we'll see how we do with 18. We'll see if we get to 18. All right?
So
Yes, sir.
what are we doing with the regularly scheduled?
We're not
Well,
meeting on
just-
April 15th. We're
So
just not.
April 1st will be the only meeting in April. Okay.
We can always change our mind on April 1st, but for now, April 1st. All right,
Is that going to give you enough time, Will?
Yes.
yes. I talked to him about that. I'm good. I talked to him about that beforehand to see if it would work with him and if we could have the room.
Yes.
All right, without objection, then we are adjourned till April 1st at 3:30 in this room. Thank y'all.
It's a real day, it's a real
Yeah,
meeting.
we used to have.